The following is a quick essay detailing my thoughts on writing fiction and the concept of alternate history. Reality is unpredictable. It does not inherently fall into narratives which can easily be identifiable, which make for a good story. For instance, if one were to write historical events in the context of a fantasy setting, it would be considered utterly unrealistic and bad writing. For instance, if I were to recontextualize the assassination of Franz Ferdinand in a fantasy story, it would be absurd. Some car carrying the crown prince of a major empire happens to stall in front of a sandwich shop, where the assassin happens to be sitting, who happens to see him and shoot him. If one included this sequence in a story, it would be considered terrible writing. Going back to alternate history, it is a flawed concept because you cannot possibly actually depict history as it is, i.e. unpredictable and built on butterfly effects, without writing a fantasy novel. An alternate history setting about Napoleon winning the Coalition Wars, for instance, will go off the rails so quickly because Napoleon will die of stomach cancer, or simply that his successor may just be incompetent. It isn't a fulfilling story to read about the accomplishments of Vladimir Lenin, for instance, and the moment he achieves victory and establishes the Soviet Union randomly dies of a stroke. Fundamentally, you either make a bad, predictable history, or constrained fantasy, neither of which are desirable. Then, if you are writing alternate history, if you actually wanted to depict realistic events in your scenario, you would have to include disrupting black swan events nobody could have imagined. If one wanted to make actual realistic alternate history, it should be borderline incomprehensibly random and unsatisfying to accurately reflect reality. Imagine yourself as a fourth-dimensional audience watching world history as it plays out like a movie. Would you actually think that this movie follows a coherent plot? Characters would randomly die at inopportune times. Events would happen with virtually no foreshadowing. It would bomb on Rotten Tomatoes, and would be seen as an instance of terrible writing. If history had coherent themes and messages, there would not be a need to even have historians, because the history itself would be self-evidently clear. To conclude, alternate history is a flawed concept because history itself is inherently absurd, as a result of being an outcome of our absurd world. Hence why the concept of alternate history is handicapped as a genre, because it is simply fantasy in denial.